If you did see Masada, if you saw the miniseries, and you know the story of how the Romans built the siege ramp up to Masada and then dragged this machine up there to break through the walls of the fortress. Obviously, they just left it there when they left. And here it is, 1900 years later. That's the ramp going up the side of Masada that the Romans built. And you might go, how in the world could they build that ramp with people up the top that had catapults and stuff like that? They used Jewish slaves to build it. And so the Jews inside Masada would not kill the Jewish slaves that were building the ramp. So they basically led to their own destruction because they would not kill their brothers who the Romans forced to build that ramp up there. But it is absolutely incredible to think of the technology they used, because then they drag this big huge thing up there. It has a big old battering ram on the top, and they're using pulley systems, and it's pretty amazing. It really, really is to see what they were able to do back then. But this is sort of looking down from the top. This is called the snake path. That's the trail that I took up there. And see that square right there? That's the remnants of one of the Roman camps, perfectly laid out in a square. And it is a fascinating place. If you ever get a chance to go to Masada, make sure you take the opportunity to do so. I wonder if I have here, real quick, we went to, well, see, these are only my iPhone pictures. I was using, here's the Jesus boat. Now you might say, why in the world is that called the Jesus boat? It was discovered, I think, in the late 1980s during a drought. It was buried in the sand on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. And it took like 15, 20 years of using this very special technique of soaking it in this kind of polymer stuff to where it wouldn't fall apart as soon as it was exposed to air. It's fascinating. But it is a first century fishing boat from the Sea of Galilee. And everybody's like, well, why would there only be one boat that has survived for 2,000 years buried in the Sea of Galilee? It certainly would have been contemporary with Jesus' ministry there in Galilee. It's rather fascinating to consider that. And real quickly, this is the synagogue at Migdal. Now you hear Migdal, hopefully what you think of is Magdalene, Mary Magdalene, Mary of Migdal. So this is the first century synagogue, so this would have been Mary's synagogue. And according to the Gospels, Jesus went about ministering in all of their synagogues. This would have been very close to Capernaum, hence very close to Simon's location. So there's a good 99% chance that those stones heard Jesus' teachings, which doesn't make them special stones. It's just simply rather fascinating that there is a pretty much a 99% chance. And you'll notice that the supports, they discovered it while building a hotel. And what you do in Israel, once you find something really important like this, you just redo your plan and build around it. So the hotel now goes around it. So there's a hotel above it. And you can still visit it, but the hotel goes above it. And they just built it up, which of course is much more expensive, but that's how it's done. And so they've done a lot of digging here in the first century area of Migdal, which is of course right on the Sea of Galilee. So, and you can see in this picture, this is the fresco on the floor. See how almost folded it looks, bumpy it looks? That's from all the earthquakes over the years, straining and stressing the floor there. But that's up toward where the front of the synagogue was. So Fascinating stuff. This is, oh, by the way, just for the fun of it, there's what the traditional Peter's home. You'll notice a church has been built on top of it. But this is traditionally, anyways, right close to the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Peter's home in Capernaum, and then probably the 3rd century synagogue in Capernaum itself, just away from the shoreline. Here's the shoreline, and I'll just say one thing. I got to speak on John 6 there at Capernaum next to the synagogue, which is pretty cool to be able to do. But what's fascinating to me, what really changed my perspective for my first time to Israel, is how small the place is, how very small it is. Anywhere you stand on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, you can see the opposite shore. It's a long ways. It's a big lake, but it's a lake. We say sea, and we figure ocean, sea, at least Great Lakes, something like that. No. Even north-south, which is its longest direction, on the North Shore, you can see the south. And so, like, this would be the area of the Gadarenes over here. So, the pigs and the whole 9 yards, I mean, all in a fairly small area. It is really, really fascinating to recognize that. And good question. Good question. I was probably told and didn't remember. You could probably look. You all have got a Bible sitting there, so I imagine y'all got a map in the back. It'll tell you. And you would think we would have known that, but until you actually see it. They are undergoing, by the way, they were at that time undergoing a major drought. And when we took the boat trip on the sea, the water is supposed to be up here at the tires. It's 15 feet low. The Sea of Galilee is currently 15 feet low. But they did get a huge storm about 3 weeks after we were there. You may have heard that one that really messed things up in Italy and flooded Venice and stuff like that. They got nailed. They got about 9 inches in one day. So that probably helped some, but they've had a drought for 4 years. You're not going to fix that in one day. So yeah, I could have a lot of fun showing you all sorts of cool pictures, the aqueducts from Caesarea Maritima, and all sorts of neat stuff like that. I'll just do one other here. Yeah, right here. This is the only spring that can possibly fulfill the geographical locations required for where Gideon separated his men. So when he separated on the basis of how they drank from the water, this is the only possible spring in the entire area. And so you look at it, and that's Emilio. Some of you know Emilio Ramos, Trish Ramos, Fish with Trish. I was with their church. That's Emilio. And most of us just plop down the water. We do everything. It's clean and clear and just absolutely beautiful. But this is where it would have happened long ago with Gideon and all the stuff that took place there. It was. One other thing. These are all the Eastern Orthodox folks getting baptized in the Jordan. And you may look at the Jordan, not the prettiest thing I've ever seen at this particular point. I mean, the headwaters are actually rather clear and nice, but by the time it gets down here, it's just soup. And right across the Jordan there is the nation of Jordan. This is the border, so it's armed for obvious reasons. And so I took this picture right before I led a Bible study there, and you'd expect we did the Bible study on baptism of Jesus or something. No. We had our very intelligent Jewish guide who's heard it all before. But he hadn't heard it the way we presented it. He'd heard a lot of people messing with the scriptures, and he even said, "You people are different." And he was listening because we were utilizing the original languages, which he did. He wasn't used to running into Christians that could read it in the original languages, stuff like that. And so I did a whole study on the messianic prophecies here. Had nothing to do with the Jordan River, but hey, we were witnessing to him anyway, so why worry about it? We did that pretty much. I did that pretty much all the opportunities I had. We were just basically doing it for our guide, but hopefully good stuff. But yeah, all the Eastern Orthodox folks down there are messing up their nice, pretty white things, getting in that icky water there at the Jordan. So it was. We are planning on doing a trip, probably an Alpha and Omega Apologia Church trip to Israel. So keep listening. You might find it to be something well worth it. So back to P52. So what does this contain? Well, what's fascinating is it contains John chapter 18, verses 31 through 34 on one side of the page, and verses 37 to 38 on the other side of the page. What's fascinating about that, of course, is that the theories had been prevalent for a long, long time that the Gospel of John was the last gospel to be written, and therefore that it had been written as late as 170. Now here you have a papyrus which is dated to around 125, so as early as 100, as late as 150. Some people have dated it to as early as the 90s, but I think it's safer to say around 125 to 150 for this. Now, you go, but there's just not that much on it. That's true. So how important could it be? Well, the importance of a manuscript is not based upon what variants it testifies to. I mean, there are some really important variants in the Gospel of John. John 1:18, very, very important. Is Jesus called monogenes theos, the unique God, or is he called monogenes huios, the unique Son, or only begotten Son? It doesn't contain that. So doesn't that diminish its importance? Well, it diminishes its importance in the sense of a witness to controversial text, but what is important about it is that this is just the Gospel of John. What it means is John, as you and I know John, existed and was being copied in the earliest period of the Christian church. It wasn't something made up later. It wasn't, as Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code said, made up by Constantine in 325. Unfortunately, many of your neighbors who've read Dan Brown think that it was. And you can be of great assistance to them to be able to show them all the documentation that demonstrates that Dan Brown was writing fiction and should have emphasized that a little bit more strongly. And here, of course, is where I'm not only wearing my P52 tie. Notice my tie right there is made out of P52. The original was not damaged in the making of the tie. And then there I am giving Bart Ehrman his P52 tie. He's smiling at that point in time. He didn't do a lot of smiling during the debate, but he did at least smile during that period of time. But that gives you an idea of what these manuscripts look like. Now here is another manuscript. And again, I wonder if, hey, wow, okay, I don't know. Here's P115. And I have talked about this here before, but we have a lot of visitors, so let me mention it again. I'm not sure if anyone has taken me up on my offer, but this is the one thing where if you have any questions about the ramifications of what I'm about to tell you, you don't ask me. You ask Van, and Van may tell you to go ask Ken. Okay, so Van, is that good? Should we just have everybody ask Ken? Is that good? Okay, all right, good. So Ken's right over here, and he's the guy with the nice-looking jacket and the weird-looking pants on. And you ask him any questions you want about this. He's just dying to answer these questions for you. Here is a page from P115. Now, P115 is one of the we only have 2 papyri manuscripts that contain major portions of the book of Revelation. Like I said, it has a very unique transmission history to it. And once again, you can see unsealed text, same type of stuff. You might say, well, why is it spread out like that? Well, that's how much of the page is missing. So this is putting it onto a page. It would have been about the size of the original, where these fragments would have been in relationship to one another. You say, how do you know that? Well, you count letters. You figure out, well, this is this part of this line, and there's that many lines between that and this next thing, and you can figure these things out. That's how we can know sort of how big the original pages were, even when they're fragmentary and stuff like that. But what's fascinating is this one comes from Revelation chapter 13, and that means there's a little fragment here that I'll blow up right up toward the top. And this contains the section about the number of the beast. The number of the beast, yeah. And everybody knows the number of the beast. I mean, pagans know the number of the beast. And everybody knows it's 666, except for one little problem, and that is the two earliest fragments of the book of Revelation we possess both contain Revelation chapter 13, and both do not have 666. You can actually see it written out there as 616. 616. That's the number of the beast in the earliest papyri manuscripts we have of the book of Revelation. And as I said, any questions about this? Because see, I grew up with people adding up the letters in Henry Kissinger's name. Now see, you younger folks are going, who in the world is Henry Kissinger? I have no earthly idea. He's still kicking, isn't he? I mean, what is he, about 142, something like that? I mean, you know, we feel badly that President Bush passed away last night. The Bush 41, I'd feel really badly if Bush 43 had passed away last night because he's not all that old. But yeah, Henry Kissinger. I remember seriously hearing people preaching on the fact that if you add up the letters of Henry Kissinger's name, it adds up to 666. And so, but has there been, you know, I don't remember anybody doing that with Trump. I remember them doing that with Obama. Very, very significantly, but I don't remember that one with Trump. I do remember it with Hillary Clinton too. So it's a rather malleable argument that you can how you add stuff up. But anyways, 616 is the number in this, and any questions about what that means on eschatology, premillennialism, amillennialism, postmillennialism, preterism, hyperpreterism, partial preterism. The day of the fall of Jerusalem, everything. Ken is our expert on all of those things, and he will answer all your questions about this. I just run to the next papyrus and avoid anything about that at all. Now, one of the things that you will see very clearly in this beautiful little manuscript here, this is P72. And I saw P72 in 1993. We were up at the World Youth Day in Denver, Colorado. And I was doing some debates with Jerry Matitix. If you've ever seen the debates we did on the papacy, 7 hours approximately between the two nights, we did debates on the papacy. And after that, we were doing outreach to the hundreds of thousands of Roman Catholics that had gathered there in Denver because the Pope visited. And so the Papal Treasures exhibit came to Denver. And so I saw that it was going to be there. I saw a newspaper account about it, and I said, Rich was with me, and I said, we got to go see that, because they said that a portion of P72 would be on display. Now, most people, that's not why they went to the Papal Treasures exhibit, I can assure you of that. But when I saw that, I said, we've got to go. I'm not really a sightseer type guy. You know, when I come out here, Ken's always trying to say, hey, you want to go do this, want to go do that? And I'm like, no, not really. I'm just not the big sightseeing type person, but to see something like this, I definitely want to go do that. This is a very readable manuscript in the sense that I can just sit here and read it, even in the rather small size that it's in. But you may notice it's, you know, the lines aren't perfectly straight, and you know, this person didn't necessarily win the handwriting competition in first and second grade like we had in the olden days. And you may notice something right here and here and up here. There are these lines. There's one right there. These horizontal lines written over three-letter words, 2 or 3-letter words. And these are called the nomina sacra. The nomina sacra. And if you are remembering your Latin from long ago, yeah, right. There are still a few schools that teach Latin, not very many, but there are still a few schools that teach Latin. Nomina sacra means the sacred names. We do not know why. There are dozens of theories as to why this is, but Christians, almost universally, in almost all of the papyri we've ever found, utilize this strange, unique abbreviation system that no one else used. How in the world did it become almost universal? And why did they do it? They would abbreviate, in the third line down, you have Jesus Christ, abbreviated as 3 letters with a line over top. That's the nomina sacra. In the fifth line down, the first word is theou, the genitive form of God. It has a line over top. It should be theta, epsilon, omicron, upsilon. It should be 4 letters. It's only 2 letters. Then later in that line, Jesus Christ again, line written above that. The 7th line down, theou. And so God, Father, Jesus, Christ, Lord, Spirit. Some even did words like David, things like that. It wasn't absolutely consistent. And some would use 2 letters, some would use 3 letters. It wasn't absolutely consistent, except for some reason, they abbreviated these words. Now, was it out of respect? Was it reverence? It couldn't be because they were just trying to save space, because you'll notice that's the end of First Peter over here. This is the beginning of 2 Peter right here. You can see what looks like us to a B right there. So that's Petru Epistolae Be, 2 Peter. So alpha would have been 1 Peter, Be, 2 Peter. They could have started that over there if they were just really, really short on papyrus or something like that, but that doesn't make any sense. We just don't know why they did it, but it certainly is useful to us, because you find almost any fragment in any collection of documents buried in the sand anywhere in Egypt or any place else, and you see these horizontal lines above letters, above words. That's a Christian document. Because sometimes they do it outside of just the scriptures too. That's a Christian document right there. Boom, grab it, let's see what it's about. It's certainly not a bill of sale or anything like that. The nomina sacra, just one of those mysteries that I guess we'll find out someday. I guess there's probably some of us that would have a hard time truly resting and enjoying eternity if we couldn't find out what happened to the nomina. How did that happen anyways? And it's like, okay, fine, we'll tell you. And you wind the tape back and, okay, I can relax now. All right, this is great. This is wonderful. So, this is now. I've told the story before, but some of you haven't heard it, so I don't want to ruin it for you to not mention it. But I almost got in trouble thanks to this manuscript, because we went into the display, and it was one of the first things they had. Now this display, you got to understand, there's diamonds and gold tiaras, and it's the papal treasures exhibits, and so the papacy's been around a long time, and I don't care about diamonds and gold crowns and tiaras and furs, and they mean nothing to me. When we got done looking at this, we just walked straight out. Who cares? Paintings, that's nice. Okay, whatever. This is all I wanted to see, and so it's under glass, of course, and I'm sitting there and I'm translating it. I'm going, look at the nomina sacra, and what's interesting is right here. How do you like that? I did that myself. So if you want to go, wow, you can. Thank you. Should have done it earlier, because it actually shows the nomina sacra much better right there and there. You can see there's theou, the genitive form of God. There's Jesu Christu. But this is what's called the Granville-Sharp construction at 2 Peter 1:1. In 2 Peter 1:1, our God and Savior, Jesus Christ, where both God and Savior are referring to the one person, Jesus Christ. So Jesus is identified by using the term theos, God, at 2 Peter 1:1. And this is written long before Constantine came along, so the entire Dan Brown Da Vinci Code theory is once again proven wrong by a manuscript from around 175 to 200. So I'm looking at that and going, oh, look at the grammar sharp construction. It's right there. I mean, I'm geeking out because I'm looking at what a Christian wrote 1,800 years ago that is directly relevant. And in fact, one of the things I pointed out to Rich as we were leaving, I said, you know, what's fascinating is back then the 28th edition had come out. So I had my little Nestle-Aland 27th edition in the car. And I said, I could give you every reading that manuscript contained from my Nestle-Aland 27th edition, as well as all the rest of the manuscripts of that section, just simply because of the genius of the notation system that we've developed for our, at that time, handheld Greek New Testaments. Now I can do it with this, because I've got all that information on my iPhone. I could reproduce the text on this manuscript out of my Accordance Bible software on my iPhone, which is, when you think about it, when you think about what Christian scholars struggled to accomplish down through the centuries, and how easy it should be for us today. There are not too many people working on it, but how easy it should be for us today. It is a fascinating thing. Well, most people just walk up to something like this and they read the placard and go, oh, and move on. But there I stand. And people would come up, and I'm ignoring them. I don't care about what anybody else. I don't care if I'm in your way. This is important. And so they'd come up, and they'd sort of look at me, and they'd look at the thing, and they'd look over at Rich, and they go, "Can he read that?" And he'd go, "Mm-hmm. Look at this, Harold. This man's reading this ancient manuscript." And so people start gathering around, and the security guys are doing this number, you know. And so Rich would grab me, and we go look at a crown for a while, and then I go right back to the manuscript again, you know. Eventually, they start getting, the security guards are inching a little bit closer, a little bit closer. It's like, you know, we got to get out of here. Like, oh, okay, fine. So we ended up leaving. But this was the very same, this was the page they had right here. And it is just that clear. And so it's written during a period of imperial persecution. Now, was it going on in the exact area where this person was writing? We don't know. We can't know. But there was persecution going on right at this time period. There's a very famous persecution that took place in Gaul around Lyon that produced some very famous martyrs. Irenaeus probably dies under this persecution around this exact same period of time. It is quite possible that the author of this, the scribe of this, not the author, the scribe of this manuscript, risked his life to produce this manuscript. And I've often thought, man, how many of us would have almost any of the Bible if we had to write out our own copy of the Scriptures? We just take it so for granted. It's so easy now to go, click, click, click. I now have the entire Bible on my phone. I'm done. You know, you don't even have to go to a Christian bookstore anymore and pay a relatively large amount of money for a nicely leather-bound copy of the Bible. You can just go online and, oh, $9.99, okay, click, I'm done, I've got it. So easy. And these people had to hand copy their own copies of it. But they did because they not only wanted to be able to read it, primarily in their churches, because so many people couldn't read, so it was much more of a communal thing, which is fascinating when you think about it. When we read the Scriptures so often just in private, how easy is it for your mind to wander? And all of a sudden you realize you're 2 paragraphs down from the last time you consciously remember anything you read because your mind wandered off to something else. That doesn't happen as much when you're in a group. When you're in a communal setting and you're reading it out for other people and then you're stopping and discussing it together, it makes a huge difference. Makes a huge difference. I just couldn't stop thinking about someone back then believed the same things I believe today and was concerned. You know, maybe this was a person who went into a fellowship and they started reading from 2 Peter. It's like, I've never heard of this. What is this? This is one of Peter's epistles. We don't have that in our church. Can I make a copy of that? Maybe that's how it happened. We don't know. We can't tell. But it's possible. And somehow, of all of those manuscripts that were being written in those days, this one has survived in pretty decent shape. I mean, like I said, you see that manuscript from P115 from Revelation, compare this is in good shape. Really, really is. The fires and the wars and the floods and the bugs and the thieves and everything else that this thing has survived to come through to our day. I consider every papyrus we find to be a gift. Almost miraculous gift when you think about it. All the things that could have happened to it along the way. That's not good. Oh, there we go. Well, sort of there. Hey, you can see the manuscript. I'll figure this out someday. I'm not sure what in the world. It's only on my little. This is my little travel unit. My full-size unit it hasn't developed this issue with this particular presentation. But it's also not as easy to carry. This thing's smaller than my iPad. It's really weird. Anyways, this is P75. This is the beginning of John, the end of Luke, the beginning of John. And what's fascinating about this manuscript is the high level of accuracy. This is undoubtedly our most accurate Gospels manuscript. It doesn't contain well, it originally contained all the Gospels, but it's fragmentary now, even though this is almost complete. And you know why it's so accurate? It took this poor scribe a long time to write this. Believe it or not, we can tell by analyzing the text how a scribe copied. If you were going to copy this, if you didn't know Greek, there would be only one way for you to copy it, right? Letter by letter. If you know the language, if you're copying English, what are you more likely to do? Word by word or phrase by phrase? And we can very often tell by the kind of variations that occur in a manuscript whether the scribe was doing phrase by phrase, word by word, and then very rarely, as in P75, letter by letter. One letter at a time. Boom, 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 boom. Now, that does lend itself to other kinds of errors if you're just doing it letter by letter by letter by letter. But this guy was really good. He was, shall we say, the ancient equivalent of OCD? You know some of those folks? Some of you are sitting there going, that's me, man. He's talking about me. Does he know about me? Who told him about me? I don't know. Is my shirt right? Oh, okay. Yeah, he was OCD. And so he was very, very careful. And the result is we have a wonderfully accurate manuscript. Now, it's still a copy of another manuscript, but it's extremely accurate. And most of the errors are one-letter errors, rather than words or phrases or stuff like that. And what's fascinating is we have another major manuscript called Codex Vaticanus. And we can tell by the readings that P75 and Vaticanus are very closely related. Now, Vaticanus is not a copy of P75. But in the genealogical tree, they go to a common ancestor that would have been very close to P75. We can tell that they are genetically related, and that is highly unusual. Even though we have, about 100, I think we're up to what, 143? Or is it 134? Let's say around 135 catalog papyri right now. Very rarely can you determine relationships between those and anything else because they come from that time period where, hey, Romans are busting into churches and wiping out entire piles of manuscripts. That's going to disrupt your family trees of manuscripts. That's a problem. But we know why it was happening. But so to be able to go, hey, wow, look at this. Here's a papyrus up here, around 175, 200, and then we've got a major unsealed manuscript of both the Old and New Testament from around 325 to 350, and we can tell by the readings they're going to a common ancestor. That's a pretty unusual and fascinating and very useful thing. to be able to discover something like that. And we've only known this for about the past 20, 30 years. About the relationship of these particular two. But very, very important, P75. And then one more, and then we'll take our break. P66, I like this particular graphic because it shows what P66 looked like before it was basically disassembled. Because the vast majority of these manuscripts end up being separated into the individual leaves for closer examination. This shows you what the book looked like. And you will notice that the papyri almost always have this or this type of shape, depending on which side it is. And it makes sense. The spine is going to be the strongest part. And you look at you look at your Bible, look at your books in your library, where's the damage? The damage is on the outer edge, normally the bottom part of the outer edge, or the upper part, because that's where it's going to be hitting things and so on and so forth. And you can see how papyrus breaks, because papyrus is plant material, and it's been laid at a 90-degree angle. And so it's going to break along the connections of the leaves themselves as they were pressed together. And that's exactly what you see in all of these papyri. So once again, there you get a really good look. What is it? Long lines of capital letters. This also is the beginning of John. You can actually, you blow it up and you can see NRK, halagos, kai halagos, sein proston, theon, kai theia, sein halagos. It's all there, and in fact, see, I did these things. Thank you very much, appreciate that. Makes me feel good, thank you. The reason I did all of this stuff, and I keep mentioning Dan Brown, is for years, everywhere I went in airports, every gate you went to, someone was sitting there reading the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. This was before Kindle became a big thing, so you actually had a book that said the Da Vinci Code on it. It's amazing. It had paper in it, you turn pages, very fascinating. Very old school. It was just amazing the impact that book was having upon people's thinking. And so I have an entire Da Vinci Code debunking presentation where I go through and just demonstrate all the blithering foolishness of that particular book, and then the resultant film, which was just as blitheringly foolish as the book. And so I was demonstrating these things. So here again is a papyrus written long before Constantine took his first breath. The theory of the book was Constantine invented the deity of Christ. Up to then, all Christians had believed that Jesus was married and had kids. Here are just is papyrus after papyrus, document after document, demonstrating that Jesus was called God long before Constantine ever came along. I mean, it's just, but that's why I did the little blow-up thing, which you have been so kind to find useful. But that is the famous last clause of John 1:1, which you end up having debates with Jehovah's Witnesses about all the time. Kai theos ein halagos, and the Word was God. There it is, and you will notice, even we saw it in P72. If I had blown up P75, you could have seen it. Here's P66. What do you have right there? Nomina sacra. This is the nominative form, theos, but the nomina sacra of God there at the end of John 1:1. But like I said, I really like how that lets you see what the book looked like as someone would have it in their hand, and how it would have been written. And again, how it survived all that amount of time. Who knows? Who knows? It's fascinating. But each one, now, the writer of P66, we'll close with this, not only did phrase by phrase transcription, so he knew Greek, but he was a little bit too concerned about how the manuscript looked rather than how accurate his transcription was. So it's not nearly as accurate as P75 is, but it looks better. So you can sort of take that for what it's worth, but it doesn't mean it's less valuable, but it does have more in the way of variation within it, and the scribe was not quite as punctilious. Sadly, toward the end of the book, it starts breaking apart, and I had a Muslim argue that P66 does not have the testimony of the deity of Christ, John 20:28, my Lord and my God. Well, that's only because it's fragmentary there. It's got the preceding words up to it, and then that part's broken off. That's not, you would not say P66 is a witness against that because it's missing it. If it's what's called a lacuna, a hole, it is not a witness for or against. And in fact, as long as everything else is the same around it, there's no reason to say that it did not contain the same text as well. So that's P66. So now you've got a good idea of what these early manuscripts looked like. We'll look a little bit later at how that changed over time. But all of this is important for what reason? Once we get to the King James stuff, I have yet to meet a King James only advocate that has ever transcribed a single papyrus or manuscript of the Greek language. King James onlyism is an English language thing primarily for obvious reasons, though, sadly, I have seen it transferred into Spanish and other languages out of church relationships and mission relationships, but not out of any type of meaningful scholarship. It's primarily promoted by people who don't know the background of the text and don't know how we got it. And the main thing we're working toward here is we need to have a solid foundation to answer a simple question. Where did the manuscripts come from that the King James translators used? Because that's the big issue. It's one thing to talk about differing translation if the underlying Greek is the same. It's totally, the vast majority of King James only argumentation is focused upon missing verses or phrases or things like that, like the one in 1 John 3:1 that we saw, and such we are. It's based upon the underlying Greek text. Well, where did the Greek text come from that the King James translators used? Is it the earliest text? Should the earliest text be what we use? We can't answer those questions if we don't have some background data from which to draw. And the vast majority of the debates on the subject just go on in the midst of a vacuum of information. And hence they can never accomplish anything. It's really like trying to argue politics on Twitter. It does not accomplish anything at all. It is a black hole of meaninglessness. That's why we have to cover this, have to have that information so we can come to the proper conclusions, okay? All right, it's straight up 12. We've got 2 hours to grab lunch. My suggestion is if you can, I cannot. I can't really touch caffeine, but if you can, right as you're coming in around 2 o'clock, triple, quadruple dose, something along that line might help. It would help me a lot too, but I can't do that. So I have to figure out some other way of doing that. The afternoon session is tough. 2 o'clock is when naturally godly people sleep. And someday Van's going to have mercy on me, and we're gonna do this with a different schedule, so including nap time on Saturday for us poor people. So, but till then, we have a afternoon session and then the evening session this evening. Van, was there anything you wanted me to say? 2 o'clock, we head back. So, thank you very much. We'll see you this afternoon.